and then get started. For everybody who's coming in, I've started the recording. This session is going to be recorded and posted to the Green Bank website, and we'll get started in just another minute or two. Thanks for being with us. Thanks, everybody. We're just giving it another minute before we get started here. Okay, let's go ahead and get started.
Sarah, did you want to start off, or would you like me to start off?
I'll get us started.
Okay,
thank you,
great.
everybody, for joining us today. My name is Sarah Harari, and I am the Associate Director of Innovation and Senior Advisor to the President and CEO at the Connecticut Green Bank. We're very pleased that there's so much interest in the end of life for solar and storage topic. I think a lot of us have done wonderful work ensuring that Connecticut can be part of the mission of transition to a green economy and supporting the deployment of this important technology that allows us to decarbonize. And it is prudent and appropriate for us to also begin thinking about how we can treat this material as it begins to be removed from our ecosystem. So I look forward to going on this journey with you. And it's my pleasure to introduce the Power Advisory Systems team, who is going to is the consultant to the Green Bank on this journey. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Andrew and Sarah to introduce themselves and to get us started here.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot, Sarah. And good afternoon, everyone. I'm Andrew Kinross. I'm a director with Power Advisory. I've been in the solar industry for 20 plus years. I've been in the battery storage industry for 10 plus years. So I'm very excited about this project where we're going to look at battery and solar panel end of life issues. I'm looking forward to meeting all of you. I know we've got a great group on the line today. I'm joined by my colleague Sarah Simmons, who's a director with Power Advisory, and is going to moderate these working group sessions. Gwyneth Roberts is a senior consultant, and Andrew Metz is a consultant with us. I'd just like to go over the agenda for today. So, Sarah, yeah, page 2, great. So we've got 4 sections. We're going to go over introductions and just have folks introduce themselves quite briefly. We do have a large group. We're also going to talk a little bit about what we're going to do as a working group. Then I'm going to talk about just an introduction to the study, the scope of the study, and then Gwyneth is going to do a review of existing U.S. policy. So what other states are doing in this space of waste and recycling as it relates to these 2 industries. And then we've set aside time at the end for a discussion period where we're going to invite participants to you know, to raise issues, you know, provide feedback, react, etc. We also have some appendices in this report. I think we're going to be posting this report to the Connecticut Green Bank website. This will be a public report that everyone will be able to see, and the appendices just contain some detailed information as it relates to the jurisdictional scan. So let's see. Yeah, as I said, Sarah is going to chair and moderate the call today. And so Sarah, I'm going to turn it over to you. Please take it away.
Very good. Really happy to be here, everybody. Sharing everybody's enthusiasm to get this started. The goal for each of these working sessions is to make sure that we're providing clear information to the members of the working group, and to make sure that the feedback from the members are incorporated as we are sort of building recommendations to provide to the Connecticut Green Bank and their team. So today's meeting, really the biggest achievement I think we can walk away from here is really having a good kickoff and an understanding of what the project's all about, and understand the perspectives of the individuals at the table today. Really just scratching the surface today as we start this engagement, and to give folks a bit of a vision in terms of where we plan to take the working group sessions going forward. We do want to have a quick roundtable introductions, if we might, but just an example here. These are the members that have been invited. And maybe just to have a bit of an orderly introduction roundtable, I might actually just go down my list here, which is somewhat alphabetical. So we can do quick introductions, maybe just briefly stating your name and company, role within the company. Just keep remarks brief. So I'm going to go down my list here just to keep it orderly. Andy Bauer.
Hi, yeah, Andy Bauer. I'm the chair of the Portland Clean Energy Task Force.
Thank you. And Prabhi. I'm not saying the full name here. Okay, I'll move on to Brett. Brett Henderson. You're on mute, Brett.
There we go. Brett Henderson, CEO and co-founder of solarpanelrecycling.com. Happy to be here.
Great. And I'm not seeing the full name again. It's Bagetti Floor. Sorry, I think it's the last name first. Florenza.
Yep. Hi, I'm Florencia Bugatti, and I represent UI, and I am with the Environmental Permitting and Compliance team.
Very good. Karen Stewart.
Yes, good morning. I'm Karen Stewart with Call to Recycle, the nonprofit organization that has been managing the collection and recycling of portable and medium format batteries for the last 30 years.
Thank you. Charlotte McCausland. Hey, Charlotte, you're on mute.
Hey, sorry about that. Charlotte from Redwood Materials. We are a lithium-ion battery recycler and battery materials manufacturer. And I manage our stationary storage recycling business.
Great. Claire Lapointe.
Hi, I'm with SIA, the Solar Energy Industries Association, and I'm a sustainability program analyst for them. So I've been working on PV circularity.
Great. Corey Lesniak.
Hi, everyone. Corey Lesniak. I'm the Associate Director for Asset Management with the Connecticut Green Bank.
Great. Emil Tallman. Okay. Gabrielle Frigon.
Hi, I'm Gabrielle Frigon. I'm the Director for the Waste Engineering and Enforcement Division with Connecticut DEEP. Hi, Commissioner.
Heather Whittle.
Hi, I'm from Earthlight Technologies, and I'm the Residential Project Coordinator.
Great. James DeSantos.
Good afternoon, everyone. James DeSantos. I'm the legislative liaison with the Connecticut Green Bank.
Excellent. Joel Kloplick.
Hi, everybody. Joel Koplick with UI Avangrid. I'm a manager in our clean energy policy group responsible for policy regarding energy storage and microgrids.
Great. Robert Klee.
Hi, everyone. Rob Klee, lecturer at the Yale School of the Environment and managing director of clean energy programs at our Center for Business and the Environment. And nice to see so many familiar faces.
Great. Lee Welton.
Hi, folks. Lee Welton, Director of Environmental Infrastructure at the Connecticut Green Bank.
Thank you. Allison McCorney.
Hi, I'm Allison. I'm a staff attorney at the Office of Consumer Counsel. And if I might, I think the person who you were trying to introduce earlier was my colleague, Prabhisha Bandari.
Very good. Sorry, I didn't see the full name properly
everyone.
there. So, hi.
Thanks, Allison.
Thank you. Oscar Gompels.
Yeah, you got it. Hi, I'm Oscar Gompels, project manager with Comstock Metals. We're a full-service solar panel recycling company based out of Silver Springs, Nevada. Thank you.
Thank you. Nick Kane.
Hello there, Nick Kane, Director of Government Affairs with Solar Cycle. We're a solar recycler.
Excellent. Peter Hutchings.
Peter Hutchings, Business Development Manager here at Ontility. We're a solar supplier, design engineering, and a lifecycle solutions provider, primarily with sustainable manufacturing and recycling.
Excellent. Robert Nicholson.
Hey everybody, Bob Nicholson here. I am the recycling manager at the Solar Energy Industry Association.
Robert Whelan.
Afternoon, my name is Robert Whalen. I'm a customer programs and product manager for Avangrid. I help support our energy solutions program in Connecticut, as well as our gas and electric demand response programs. Thank you.
Robert McSad. Roger, sorry.
Yep, sorry about that. Hi, Roger Mixad. I'm President and Executive Director of Battery Council International. We're a 100-year-old trade association representing battery manufacturers and recyclers across North America.
Great. Sarah Pine.
Sarah Pine, Associate Director on the Incentives Program team at Connecticut Green Bank.
Claire Sickinger.
Hi, everyone. I'm Claire Sickinger. I'm an Associate Research Analyst for the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection's Bureau of Energy and Technology Policy.
And Danielle Spalding.
Hi, everyone. Danielle Spalding. I help lead our government affairs and communication efforts at Service Solutions, who is a battery recycling and management materials company, collecting, transporting, and processing to extract critical materials from end-of-life and scrap batteries.
Great. Stephanie, the full name, Stephanie A. The full name isn't coming up.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Etruria. I work on the asset management team at the Connecticut Green Bank.
Great. Stephen Feinberg. Yep.
I'm president at Blue Water Battery, and we recycle, repurpose, and find reuses for renewable energy products such as solar panels and batteries.
Great. Tracy Benzo.
It's Tracy Bizzano. I work at Earthlight. That's okay. And I work in the service department as a service coordinator.
And last, Hank Webster.
Hi, I'm Hank Webster. I'm a senior policy advisor at DEEP in the energy branch.
Excellent. Anybody I missed? Okay, thank you very much. It was great just to see the diversity of folks that were on the call today and the perspectives that we'll hear from. So briefly, just for background, the Connecticut PURA has asked the Green Bank to establish this working group and to study issues related to solar panel and battery waste. So the goal of the study is really to identify the environmental effects of solar and battery waste, and also research approaches that have worked in other jurisdictions to address these concerns, and ultimately generate recommendations, including pros and cons of the approach, and also address implementation timelines and cost of each approach that could be implemented. So input from this working group is going to be essential. We do plan on holding monthly meetings to get feedback as we develop our recommendations and complete our research. As mentioned by Sarah, there is a website live. Link is here in the presentation for those interested, where the meeting materials and will be posted, and additional documents might be shared for review. In between meetings, you can expect that, we may be reaching out for data or have different information requests. We might have opportunities as well for folks to respond to surveys and other information requests. And we might seek your feedback following the presentation of information, so that we can follow up at the next meetings. But the goal here for us is to share some of those key lessons learned from other jurisdictions, to look at environmental impacts and market readiness, look at the economic impact of various approaches, and also to think about the best fit solutions for Connecticut. Obviously, it needs to be implementable in Connecticut and work in according to to the climate and environment that we find in Connecticut. We have some proposed monthly topics. Won't go through this in super great detail here, but today is really all about kicking off the engagement, getting to know each other on the call, but also understanding some of the basics of the engagement that we're proceeding with. In April, we'll be looking at some of the current and future needs, as well as bringing forward information about the regulatory and policy landscape review. Continuing the conversation in May, looking at funding sources and policy options. In June, we hope to discuss and bring forward some of those draft recommendations and have a discussion with the members on our thinking and get your feedback there. And then wrapping things up in July with discussions on next steps and presentation of information at that final stage. So condensed focus working group, good to see that there's like a tight frame around this engagement. And again, looking forward to building out this conversation with the group. Given that it is a large group, we wanted to make sure that we have a really good way of getting feedback from everybody, and recognizing that it is often kind of difficult to work in this setting where there's so many different voices on the call, and we want to make sure that we do hear from everyone. So during this presentation, we've actually set up a Slido, and I'll get the details for everybody, and I'll pop it in the chat too, just in case. But we are inviting folks to submit questions throughout the presentation today via the Slido, and then we will focus our discussion on the questions that receive the most votes during the session, and we can focus in our conversation on areas that are of most interest to the working group. And then following the meeting, we'll be taking that feedback. We might be able to respond to some of the comments, or incorporate those comments into our thinking and into our planning for the next sections and with our recommendations. But again, we recognize this is a big working group. We have an hour, so we do ask that everybody participate actively in the session, contribute questions, stay on topic, and just be time conscious as well when we're making remarks. But also use the Slido as you can to put the questions in, so we can record the questions and have conversation on those topics that are of most interest to everybody during the session. So if you've used Slido before, it's really simple. If you go to the website, slido.com, the first thing you'll see is enter a presentation room, and it's CTBG 2024, so Connecticut Green Bank 2024, and you'll see the opportunity to add Q&A, and it can be comments or whatever you want to have recorded through the discussion, and we'll focus our discussion on those top priority areas. Okay, now turning it over to my colleague, Andrew.
Okay, great. So I'm just going to go over sort of the scope of the study. I must say we have an incredible amount of expertise on the call, right? So which is great. Some of the information that I'm going to be sharing will be quite basic to you, but we do want to get everyone on the same page, so everyone understands what the study is about and how we're all going to contribute to the study and ultimately come to a successful outcome with the study. So first off, just wanted to go over the scope of the policy that we'll be developing through this process. So what the regulator indicated is that this should be as it relates to state-administered funding programs, which are listed below. And these include residential solar programs, the Residential Solar Incentive Program, which began in 2011, and then it was replaced by the Residential Renewable Energy Solutions Program in 2022. Also the SCEF program, which is community solar. And then in addition to that, non-residential energy solutions. So this is commercial and industrial systems. And then finally, all of the energy storage programs. Now, this will be in scope, and these programs mostly relate to residential and C&I, but not utility scale. But one thing that we are going to discuss is what will be the full scope of the study, and we'll also be considering unsubsidized programs, which could be everything from residential small systems up to utility scale large systems. But that's one of the items that we're going to be talking about. Then if we go to the next slide, Sarah. Just to go through in terms of like the small scale systems, both for solar PV and for battery, just going from left to right here. Obviously, the solar panel is a big part of the system. That's really going to be the focus of the study, just because it's the most expensive piece of equipment in a solar project, and so we'll be spending some time on that, and that's also where there is some salvage value. In addition to that, there's the inverter. There's different kinds of inverters, micro inverters for a given panel, or a string inverter for a set of panels, and there's even larger inverters as well. And then you get into the racking and electrical. There's racking for roof mount. There's racking for ground mount. There's a wide variety of electrical wiring, junction boxes, fuses, those types of things. Then if we go to battery, it's sort of a similar picture. We're going to focus on the battery itself. There's some other related equipment, other related hardware equipment, and then of course all the interconnection, the conduits, the wiring. And then if we go to the next slide, just want to go over sort of at a high level what not only recycling, but other options are when you come to the end of a performance period, let's say a 20-year contract period for a solar project or a battery project. And so this is, just a bit of a branch chart of what you can do when you come to the end of one of these performance periods. I'm going to go from the bottom to the top here. So, the first thing is you can extend the life of the project. So either you can extend the offtake, you can recontract this project for another, say, 10, 15 years, or you could transfer ownership to another party, the host or another third party. Then there's refurbishing. Maybe there are some components that need to be replaced, but otherwise, the system can continue as is. Maybe some single-axis tracker components need to be replaced, or the inverters need to be replaced. And it can either be the full system. If it's a 100 kilowatt system, it can be a 100 kilowatt system going forward, or it can be a smaller system. So there have been examples of where part of a system might have been damaged, and maybe you can continue with 50 kilowatts, but then the other 50 kilowatts needs to be recycled or thrown out. And then repowering. Repowering is another term. It's probably more commonly used in wind farms, where a wind farm has reached its end of its contract and basically you go and put in a new wind turbine. The same thing can be done in solar and battery. You could replace certain components with new state-of-the-art technology, whether that be the panels or the inverters. And there also could be some site redesign as well. But the thing about the repowering is that you're using all the existing infrastructure that's in place and permitted and all that, as opposed to starting with a new site. And then finally on top, decommissioning. So that's if let's say the project is going to be decommissioned for whatever reason. It could be a contractual reason, or it could be the absolute end of life, and this is not generating power anymore. There's three items we have here. One is repurpose, find some other use for a given component. Secondly, recycle, and third is to dispose of items that you can't do anything else with. And then we have just an extended branch here, just very high level, both on the solar and battery side. And so solar, we've got some different kinds of technologies here. The vast majority of the market is crystalline silicon, but there's also thin film and CIS. And this is where we'd be recycling the glass, the aluminum frame, the silicon, et cetera. And then on the storage side, this is where we're using either aqueous solutions like acids to separate certain materials, or heat to separate materials and recycle those materials. So yeah, that's and then we had the question. What are the best practices to reduce waste that enters the, okay, yeah, so just a couple of questions here, again, that we're going to get to later on. But that's just sort of a high level overview of the scope of the study. We'll be giving kind of more details, but this is just the big picture for now. And then I think what I'll do is I'll turn it over to Gwyneth to talk about some initial research that we've been doing in terms of what some other jurisdictions have been doing in this space. And then after that, we'll be able to get into a discussion, answer any questions about either what I said or Gwyneth said, and any other topics of discussion. So with that, Gwyneth, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So my name is Gwyneth Roberts. I'm with Power Advisory, and I've been providing some of the back-end research into both technology options and a review of existing policy in the US. For today, similar to what Andrew was doing, I just wanted to do some scene setting, kind of get us ready for some of the longer discussions we're going to have on the topic of policy in April. So part of our task here involves a review of similar recycling and disposal policies and initiatives in other states. This review here focuses mostly on the recycling portion of that flow chart we just saw. There are other initiatives that are focusing on sort of reuse, extending life, and reducing the volume of waste from the outset. But this initial scan is focused on tools and policy levers to increase the proportion of panels that are recycled rather than disposed of in landfills. Now, this work is ongoing, but so far our review has found applicable programs in the states that you see here, as well as one federal action proposed from the EPA. So as this work continues, there will be more, but this initial scan has definitely shown that this is an emerging area of policy development. So this map may look a bit different when we're done, but on the whole, most states have not yet been able to take this issue on from a regulatory angle. And so though this process is that we're in right now is one of many evaluating options for future actions. In that sense, we have good company in that there are a number of other states also taking this on at the moment. So as this is just our first meeting, I'm just going to give a brief overview for those who may not be as tuned in to ongoing activities, and just some ideas that we can begin to think about. If we can go back to the map for a second, this is colored based on the type of actions taking place. So blue are policies establishing requirements that have been successfully enacted. So far in our review, this is only California and Washington. And even then, California's is more of an adjacent action, but I'll get to that in a moment. Green is proposed legislation. So throughout this, some may be added or even dropped off if they lose momentum. But for now, we're focusing on proposals that look like they have a fighting shot in committee, and could provide an interesting framework for our thoughts. And then finally, yellow just indicates that these states are engaged in either a similar working group process to us, or they've funded studies or reports looking into this topic. So if we can go to the next slide just for a moment before I go state to state, I'd like to start to look at sort of two policy frameworks that have emerged from this initial review, methods to encourage or mandate recycling, mostly looking at solar PV, just because that's what's available for examples in the US right now. But the first is extended producer responsibility, sometimes referred to as extended producer stewardship. This creates requirements for manufacturers to take charge of end-of-life practices for products that they sell or distribute in a state. This is a broad framework that's in place in a number of states for other consumer items, maybe small household batteries, certain plastics and chemicals, mattresses, or other things. But the responsibility for end-of-life decisions, the planning, and in a few cases, the funding for these is placed on the manufacturer as a requirement of doing business in that state. Now, this doesn't necessarily prevent these costs from being passed on to the consumer in other ways, but it assigns responsibility up front to ensure that these items are recycled or disposed of in whatever way the policy requires. Now, the real only tangible solar recycling requirement passed in the US so far follows this model. That's in Washington. I'll talk about that in a minute. But the second sort of broad framework is advanced fee administration. So this is a structure that collects funding for eventual recycling activities at the time of purchase. This is commonly a fee borne by either the consumer or the owner of the module. In this case, it would either be a household or a sort of larger developer. The revenues collected from this fee are then allocated for either a state-managed recycling and disposal program, or are just simply earmarked used to finance private operations or recycling refunds with that goal. So these are sort of the two broad ways of looking at recycling mandates, but some of the policies that I'll be reviewing in the slide and some that we can talk about in future meetings have more to do with setting requirements that mitigate harm from disposal, or trying to encourage recycling without setting a clear mandate. These can look like either more stringent or lax handling and storage requirements, changing classification under existing waste regulations, assessing fees or banning the disposal of these modules in landfills, toxicity testing, just for a few examples. But these can be either effective interim policies or sort of baseline foundational actions that can make it easier to put other policies in place. So if we go back to the states, I'll just give a short overview of some of the states of interest. So Washington, like I mentioned earlier, in 2017 passed the PV module stewardship and take-back program. It's an extended producer responsibility and stewardship model. It requires solar PV manufacturers to plan for, finance, and implement the take-back and recycling for all modules, all PV modules sold in the state of Washington. It's from the moment the program was passed, so anything sold from July 2017 onwards falls under this. Each manufacturer that does do business in the state will need to submit a stewardship plan by July of 2024, and that plan needs to outline the take-back program that they're planning on implementing, the financing of that program, how they're going to provide locations for statewide accessibility, and how all of this is going to be done without additional cost being borne by consumers. So the plans have not yet been submitted, again, July 2024. So there are yet to be any sort of lessons learned from the implementation of this, but this is one of the only sort of tangible examples we have so far. And then the other framework, California, seems the closest to implementing this. This is still proposed in California, but they are thinking of classifying solar panels under their existing e-waste stewardship program. That would create sort of an advanced fee system for solar panels at the time of purchase. A small fee would be put into a fund that was earmarked specifically for solar PV recycling. It's not yet passed yet. It's still in session this year, but we'll be monitoring it. One of the concerns that's come up with their broader e-waste program that covers a few other technologies, TVs, batteries of various kinds, just e-waste in general, is that the fees and the funding for the program is coming at the time of purchase, but at the same time, they're needing to manage the recycling and disposal of either products or modules that are coming offline that same year. And the amount of purchases and fees coming into the fund may not necessarily match the needs that year of items being disposed. So that sort of mismatch of timing is something that other states have seen as an issue and are trying to address with their own processes, just something to keep in mind. On the federal level, the EPA is considering reclassifying solar panels under universal waste regulation. California already does this, so that's just taking existing waste regulation for hazardous materials and allowing solar panels to be treated with a bit more lax requirements for anything from transportation, handling, storage, provided that they pass certain toxicity testing requirements. An issue that California has been facing, even though they've allowed these less stringent requirements for panels in state after being disposed, once they cross state lines, then EPA rules come into effect, and there are very few recycling facilities within the state of California. So a federal action on this level can help just to standardize some of these ancillary needs for transporting to what may be sort of centralized, larger recycling operations. And then just looking at some of the working groups and reports that are happening right now, North Carolina authored a final report on this subject. They looked at small rooftop solar and battery storage. They were looking at whether or not a stewardship program or other structure would be appropriate for them. And at the time of publishing, this was back in 2021 when the final report was published, with stakeholder meetings and analysis going on for a few years before that. But they found that they could not recommend a stewardship program at the time. It was due to concerns on cooling solar development in the state, as well as feasibility following their review of cost, capacity, and availability of solar recycling in the US. They did, however, recommend that this be taken up again in the future as technology, the scale, and cost advance. And they also indicated support for some of these ancillary or, foundational actions like waste classification, universal waste, standardizing toxicity testing procedures. And then when they looked at battery storage, this group in particular just ended up pushing that recommendation off. They opted to they recommended that the state wait for federal action on requirements for both second life and recycling of batteries. And then moving to New Jersey, they also had a similar report for solar recycling in the state. They ended up taking a bit of a different approach. Rather than looking at frameworks for mandating recycling, they opted to recommend the increase of recycling capacity locally in state. So that's for the construction and operation of solar recycling facilities in New Jersey. And then that paired with a recommended solar PV landfill ban would hopefully either encourage recycling in the state or for the modules to be shipped out of state for sort of larger operations to take care of. Maine also took a look at this issue more recently. They filed a report in January of 2024. Maine is one of the states that has sort of a broad stewardship portfolio of items that have extended producer stewardship requirements. And they took a look to see whether solar PV should be included in that. At the time, they said, no, they don't recommend that, but we're reaching out to them to see sort of the rationale behind that decision. Their report on that was quite brief, and we're wondering, when they made their assessment of recycling capacity and availability, especially because it was such a recent report just a few months ago, we're hoping to get more clarity on what their threshold for that was and whether or not they were confining themselves to sort of the region when it comes to recycling capacity, or whether or not they were looking at the entire US. So that's one of the states that'll have more details, hopefully next time we talk. And then the remaining, so Illinois, Minnesota, and maybe it's just Illinois and Minnesota, they have similar working groups happening right now. These are just states that we're monitoring. They don't yet have a final report published. They don't sort of have findings that we can review right now, but if interim or final reports come out throughout the process of these working groups, we'll also be paying attention to those outcomes. So I have more details on each of the states that I've shown here further down in the report. I'm not going to go into them right now, but the materials can be sent around and reviewed later. And it's meant to give us just some context with which to think about these frameworks, how they do or don't apply to Connecticut. If anyone of the very talented and qualified members of this group has any other ideas, any other frameworks, any other policies or studies that they'd like to discuss in a future meeting, particularly in April, please reach out to me and I'll include it. But we are counting on you all to provide your perspectives and expertise, particularly in evaluating how these can apply best to Connecticut. And I can take questions, or Andrew and I can both take questions on our sections together, if anyone has any.
So I think we can. So we're asking for the questions to go through the Slido, and there's been some activity there, and it's great to see that folks are also kind of voting on that. Gwyneth, your presentation was great in terms of the feedback here. So obviously there's a lot we can learn from other jurisdictions. So with your permission, Sarah and Andrew and Gwyneth, I'm gonna start the discussion session portion and facilitate that. And again, just a reminder to submit the questions to the Slido and vote on questions. But the first question actually goes to your a point that you just made, Gwyneth, with respect to the experience of members on this working group. And the question is, have people and organizations on this call begun work in Washington or California? And if yes, how have those programs worked? So I'm interested from working group members on this topic, if they have any experience that they'd like to share at this time. No one's raising their hands. Maybe that's an action item actually that we can take away too, right? So thinking about, engaging with folks in other jurisdictions who have worked on projects in these jurisdictions to see what their experience might be. But seeing none, I'm going to move to the next question here. And it's, how can we be sure that resell, refurbish, repair solar services are not indirect dumping or near end of life panels in low income communities and countries? So that's a really good question. I don't know whether Andrew or Gwyneth or others on the call have any sort of experience or comments related there.
Yeah, well, let me start. And Gwyneth, if you've found anything on the policy side, feel free to chime in. But I think this is a great point, and I can see that in Connecticut, people just sell they just ship out the panels or the batteries, for them to be put in a landfill or some community in another state, and it's like, well, that gets rid of the problem. I mean, I don't think that certainly doesn't get rid of the problem from Connecticut's perspective. I mean, I think Connecticut wants to be environmentally sensitive and be a good steward for the environment. So, and certainly, we've really seen this in developed countries around the world, kind of disposing of certain things in undeveloped countries of the world.
I wonder if this question is referring to sort of pawing off what someone would see as a less efficient or less useful panel that still works, but putting that on sort of rooftops in a low-income community. Is that what this question is referring to, or are they referring to sort of the location of landfills? Because if it is that second point.
I think either way, it's something that we should definitely consider as we progress through the study. Part of the reason I knew that this working group needed to be as broad as it was, because I was at a conference with solar and storage manufacturers, and I asked many of them sort of what their end of life plan was, and one of them was exactly this plan. Oh, we just send it to the developing world. Yes, let's be a little bit more robust and circumspect with our second use end of life plan as we go through this process. Your input will be appreciated about what the appropriate policies and procedures are to ensure that the second life applications are not competing with other better alternatives for disadvantaged communities.
Yeah, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, Andrew, but I'm bringing it up because I think one of the outcomes that I didn't mention, I believe from the New Jersey study, was that second use, particularly for in the case of nonprofits that ship used either solar or battery modules overseas for use in other countries as part of NGO outreach and sort of energy independence in other places in the world. That ended up being one of their recommendations for best practices moving forward. So I'm wondering if we can learn from them sort of how they wrestled with that idea and how they ended up coming on the side of supporting that.
Yeah, because the point there is what happens, as soon as it gets into the third world country, you've lost touch with it, right? So does it ultimately, is it ultimately used in the third world country and then disposed in the landfill? I mean, if it is, then that maybe Connecticut doesn't want to be in that position where the second life is in a undeveloped country, and then it ends up in a landfill. So these are just all things we have to think about and address.
Yeah, I'm seeing some hands up, so I want to get to some of the working group members. First, Steve Feinberg.
Yes, I have a little bit of experience with this because we actually do send stuff overseas, and they do put it into projects, and they put it in projects for many, many years. And I guess my perspective on it is that I would rather see these panels reused overseas rather than have new ones being made. I think for the environment, it's better to reuse it than it is to have to build new ones and then the energy that's taken to grind them up. The issue that you have, can you monitor if they're going to throw them into a landfill overseas and that you don't want? That is definitely something that you can't prove that they would do it. But what I have found with other countries is they have regulations too. They're not exactly, we like to call them third world, but I mean, Kenya, you may say, is third world, but believe it or not, they have very strict regulations on how this stuff is processed. So that's just my take on it.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Gabrielle?
Thanks. So I've got a couple of points I wanted to make, and one is that the regulations governing electronic waste management in Connecticut requires downstream partner validation or verification. That the downstream partners for the electronic waste recycling programs adhere to EPA requirements regarding offshore materials disposition. I can't remember the acronym. I'd have to look it up in the regulations, but we do have regulations already established for electronic waste that I think could be borrowed from. And then the other point I want to make is that perhaps what we should be contemplating is some minimum efficiency for reuse. So if the efficiency of the equipment is at 50% or lower, then that wouldn't necessarily, or we could decide that it wouldn't necessarily pass the test for actual reuse, and that the intent there may be subsequent disposal or shedding of the responsibilities. But if we do that, we could link it to the efficiency of the units, of either the panels or the batteries or other components.
Thank you. Nick.
Hi, thanks for the opportunity to comment. So I did want to weigh in on 2 points. First of all, that there is an existing EPA definition of what is legitimate recycling of hazardous secondary material. And I can share the link to the EPA website on this, but a Google search will find it pretty quickly. And in addition, we at our recycling facility in Odessa, Texas, which is in operation and is scaling to be able to recycle 1 million crystalline silicon panels by the end of this year, we're ISO certified in 9001, which is quality management, 14001, which is, I believe, EH and S, and then 45001, which is environmental. And we think that standards like this are a good way to help clarify what recyclers are doing with their operations and how they're managing their operations. And in addition, there's the R2 standard, which has been put out by SERI, which could be a good tool. But I can say, as someone who's actively engaged in working on California's AB 1238, I believe it is, and AB 2, that this is a question that we're discussing in our internally and with trade groups in California about how best to define what is legitimate recycling, what's a minimum threshold for recycling, what's the right way to define it. I'm going to be working on some materials around this week and over the coming weeks, and I'd be happy to share them more broadly if that's useful. The other point I'd just like to make around reuse, to pick up what I think Andrew's point and the point that Steve was making, is that reuse is, of course, a viable pathway for dealing with modules that have a reasonable amount of life left in them. SolarCycle is not in favor of shipping them overseas to developing nations in particular. And the reason is because even though they may have strong laws on their books, in general, enforcement is not as strong in developing countries. Varies, obviously. There may be developing countries that have an excellent e-waste program. But the other thing is that we don't see sufficient capacity facilities to recycle panels. So if they're shipped abroad to a developing country and they break, or they reach their end of life perhaps more rapidly than a new panel, there often isn't the infrastructure and the recycling facilities to handle those panels when they do reach their final end of life. So we caution against that. What we are doing at Solar Cycle is we have built a behind the meter 500 kilowatt, or we're currently installing. I was just at the facility yesterday actually, and I got a tour. We're building a 500 kilowatt behind the meter on-site solar farm that will be composed of second life modules. And so that's our first port of call. And as folks who are following industry news know, we are building a third facility, which will be in Georgia, that will recycle modules and will make new glass for new solar panels at the facility. And we anticipate, although haven't done any, there's nothing finalized yet, but we anticipate doing some additional second life array development in conjunction with that project. So we personally think that the state of California, the state of Connecticut, pardon me, should be cautious about sending modules overseas for reuse in that way.
Yeah, thank you for that. So I'm seeing this is gonna sort of natural part of the process too, right? Where there's going to be divergence of perspectives as well. So it's good to hear that as well from you, Nick. Thanks for that. Andy's up next with his hand up.
Thank you. So I wanted to take off. Gabrielle made an excellent point, and I just wanted to sharpen that maybe a little bit. Can the efficiency of a solar panel, a solar array, be made on site? And to kind of further that, educating people who have solar, like myself, that is an option that would be available. I know it's not really right now, but can we make that available? And then again, a step further, can we make a calculus for someone who's interested in solar, and the solar panels which are used, maybe they're 80-85% efficient, but their depreciation is going to be huge. So they're going to be a lot more cost effective for someone who's looking to purchase solar, to go with used option over new.
Hmm.
Thanks.
Thanks, Andy. Brett.
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful question, and the U.S. market is well in its infancy stages here. So I think it's hard to draw a line in the sand and try to prevent panels being reused, whether that's in the United States or globally. But what the question, whomever asked, I think it's going down a strong path, though. That is, we're not really regulated from a recycling or refurbishment perspective throughout the country. So what that does do is open up avenues for, sending out panels that are untested and don't go through any type of, real process to assure what their life cycle is, to assure they don't have burn spots in them or warping or water damage. So I think from a state's perspective, you could more or less encourage some of these panels or companies that are doing refurbishment or recycling through some level of vetting and kind of creating a list for that matter to try to prevent someone saying, all right, I have 4 panels that may work, but I'm gonna load up a whole container and send them overseas somewhere, because then they will ultimately be landfilled. But I think it's hard to ultimately say that an opportunity for actual true tested working panels into parts of the world that might not be able to afford the newer, wattage panels. Closing that down early on is probably a bit early. So, there's different things the state could do in terms of, preferred list or and really creating some level of standards and criteria or expectations for how a panel is actually deemed reusable. Bob Nicholson's group over at SIA is doing wonderful work, on the recycling side through levels of vetting. So, I mean, there's all sorts. I'm sure there's going to be some private sector and industry groups themselves that will be continuously vetting recyclers and refurbishers, but I really think ahead of any type of regulation and actual certification or standard, that's probably what the state can lean on.
Brett, before I lose you, I noticed that you had a question or a comment in here as well, related to North Carolina, and I think you're just flagging another jurisdiction that has a requirement for utility scale projects to submit decommissioned and end of life plans. Are you familiar with that?
I am. Yeah, I actually was able to speak on the legislative floor earlier this year on this topic. So there actually is a law that's passed and was enacted in July of 2023. The working group and work study that the state began in 2018 and they published it in 2021. There's actually been some further development since then. So yeah, any utility scale farm over 2 megawatts has until 2025 to submit a decommissioning plan and end of life management plan, as well as certain financial assurances to the state's DEQ. And they had also given them latitude to create additional rules and regulations outside of the actual law that has already been enacted. And they'll probably be having some sort of release on those at some time, maybe in the summer of this year. So they actually have passed some level of legislation specifically on end of life and decommissioning, as well as it's a unique scenario here in North Carolina. That's where we're in. We have 4 different locations, but we're headquartered in North Carolina. It's actually getting bipartisan support just for way opposite ends of the spectrum here in North Carolina. So in terms of the recycling, whether you're looking at landfill capacity issues or, return land to use type scenarios. So I think you're going to see, oh, that was bad timing. I think you're going to see a myriad of developments, at least in North Carolina, in the really short term.
Cool. So that's a good one to add to our list, and just to call out to other working group members. If there's a jurisdiction that you're aware of, please let us know about it. We'll make sure that we include it into our summary and reporting. So thanks
Sarah,
for that.
I had a follow-up question for Brett. Brett, you mentioned SIA is doing work, and I know there's someone on the call from SIA, but I'm just curious, which constituencies are they, like, what's the purpose of the research? Is it to provide advice to sort of their members, developers, state governments, federal government?
Yeah, I believe
curious.
I believe Robert's on the call, so I won't speak too much for them. But if you do look at what they're putting together, they're doing some level of vetting in terms of actually physically seeing a recycler and making sure it's not just the standard aluminum's removed and then the rest just gets commingled and shredded. They're actually advocating for true recycling processes, and I'm sure it's much more in depth than that, so I won't speak for Robert much further.
Gotcha. Thank you. Robert, did you want to, sorry, I'm not seeing everyone here, but Robert, did you want to comment at all? I'm just curious kind of what SIA is doing and whether they're kind of, wanting to influence policy or that type of thing.
Maybe he might have just dropped off the list, actually. He might have had a connection issue. I saw him on it just a few moments ago. That's why I didn't want to speak for SIA, because we're just a member. Okay. We're not SIA.
Okay, no worries. I'm all set. Sarah, I'll let you continue.
Nope, all good. Next on the list here is Oscar.
Hi, I'm Oscar with Comstock Metals. So we have an operational facility in Silver Springs, and then we've just started the scale up to 3 million panels per year. And I just wanted to kind of share what we're seeing on the sales side is that, we're still really very much learning the lifespan of these panels. We've seen whole farms taken down after 12 years and huge projects for like at 15 years, right? This is fully decommissioned utility scale plants that are just getting taken down. Now, obviously you have market distortion effects with subsidies and tax credits. And so the US market is somewhat unique, but as we need to deeply understand these lifespans so we can ascertain, okay, how long is left on this panel that we're going to send abroad to a community or a country. And once we've learned that, and once we can figure out what it truly is versus what the manufacturers are saying or what the warranties are saying, then we can make more effective policy. So I just wanted to bounce off what Nick and Brad are saying.
Thank you for that.
I guess the problem with that is we still need to wait many years to know what the true lifetime is, right? It's not something we're going to know. I mean, they put them in these ovens and simulate 25 years of life, but until you get 25, 30, 35, 40, some people are saying 40 years, but the only 40-year panel I know is one in Massachusetts that it's literally one panel,
Right.
so we still have to wait, and it's like it's almost been destructed by hail and things, but yeah,
and Andrew,
but
I
that's
think
still a good
to your
point.
to your point there, there's also, in the desert environments, we've got the sheer heat causing issues and degrading the lifespans in one way there. And then we had a massive contract in New Jersey, and that one, the freeze thaw cycle was actually causing those panels to degrade faster there. So we have this like variety of kind of field environments that are really affecting the lifespan.
And I
Sarah,
wonder what your thoughts are on an efficiency threshold.
Sarah, but before we answer that question, do you mind stopping the screen share so we can see folks?
Yep.
Sorry, Gwyneth, go ahead.
I was just a follow-up to what Oscar just said, an efficiency threshold to try to tackle that unknown of absolute lifespan.
Yeah, I would need to think about it more, but I think that would address most of what we would need to cover it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Daniel.
Hey, this is Daniel Zotos with Redwood Materials. We are a lithium-ion battery recycler based out of Northern Nevada. We're also a sustainable battery materials producer focused on domestic anode and cathode production. I just had a quick question for Brett. In your reference to policy just now, were you primarily focused on solar panels, or was there also battery storage implications in that policy as well?
Yeah, it represents the entire infrastructure of a utility scale or commercial scale farm over 2 megawatts. So those all those plans will have to be submitted through DEQ in terms of state planning to be able to build, and then they also gave more latitude and I guess for lack of a better word, to some of the local municipalities in terms of new projects and what they're requiring to get permitting. But it's already enacted, which is pretty cool to see that happen in our space. But there's more latitude given to DEQ for our future rulemaking without it having to be a whole new legislative session passing it. So you probably keep an eye on that as well. But if it's an easy for a quick Google search if you want to get into the whole plan. The bill isn't bogged down with 100 other things attached to it, so you should be able to kind of read the ins and outs of it. But it would be for all the infrastructure. So yeah, if there's batteries on site, racking, cabling, inverters, all of that stuff, there's levels of a requirement, a plan that has to be submitted to the state to operate.
Understood. Well, I'll save it for another call, but would love to discuss with this group just Redwood's work so far in terms of decommissioning of early, grid scale battery energy storage systems as well, and some of the work and learnings we've had. So I'll save that for another time, but great to be on as well.
And if I just for one quick moment to kind of follow up on what Oscar was saying, I think what we've seen early on is about a lot of panels coming through our facility have been maybe 12 or 13 years in use. If you eliminate the ones that are, haven't even been used yet because of construction or delivery damage, then obviously you could have a weather event that could occur at any given time in certain regions. Those are a little bit more prominent. There was the large one that just occurred in Texas last week that from the looks of it took out hundreds of thousands of panels. So I feel a lot of the manufacturers are obviously trying to extend the durability of these, and maybe panels that are going online now or in the future will get closer to that 25 to 30-year mark. But we have not received a lot of panels that came to us because they've gotten 28, 30, 32 years and it's time to recycle them.
And what was the weather event? Sorry. How did the panels get damaged specifically?
A hailstorm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. I'm gonna look at another question that came up through the Slido, and it says, can a second life solar or storage technology be used in the RRES/NRES/ESS programs? Are there any program requirements that need to be met? So I don't know the answer to this question. I'll turn it over to Andrew, maybe to help me out there as well.
I think that would be Sarah from Green Bay.
Sure.
So I think that's one of the things that we'd like to cover in this program. So, as co-administrators of the battery storage program, the Green Bank will be working with our utility partners around sort of taking a second look at that. And then I know we have representatives from UI on today from both the storage and the solar side. So I think it would be good from a program administrator standpoint if we could take a look back through our program manuals, see if there's any requirements. For example, I know in the storage program we have sort of a minimum efficiency requirement, and take a look at what requirements need or should be met or modified to accommodate second use. Anybody from UI, or was that if anybody from Eversource was able to join up for being outreached around that?
I think I can comment on this question, but I'd like to see what exactly it was again. It was about reusing second life batteries. Is that correct?
Yeah. So can second life storage, solar and storage technology be used in the RRES or NRES or ESS programs?
I'm embarrassed to say I'm not familiar with what programs there are, but they can be reused. There's a UL has what would you call it? Testing requirements to do it. I don't know if your Underwriters Lab is what it used to be called. They have standards that they have. I have to give you the UL number. I'll look it up. And then there's companies that actually take them and they bring the batteries up to that standard so they can be reused.
I think the question was around the program rules as it relates to this funding program. In other words, if you're going to get funding from a residential solar program in Connecticut, do you need to use a new panel on a project to get the funding, or can you come with second life panels to get the funding? So it's more of an administrative question.
Okay, because she was saying energy. She was saying storage, not panels.
It applies to both. So we administer
Both.
the statewide battery storage program, which is called Energy Storage Solutions. And there's also RRES and NRES, which are the residential and non-residential energy solar programs. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
okay,
and
but they
this
do
is,
have a
Joel.
standard. I'll see if I get the number from them, but that's how you do it, particularly energy storage, the larger utility scale.
And this is Joel Koplik with United Illuminating. So, with regard to the Energy Storage Solutions program, there are program requirements, to Sarah's point, with regard to round trip efficiency, as well as a 10-year warranty on the battery. So we'd really have to consider what the current program rules are and how that might apply to any sort of refurbished or reconditioned battery systems. With regard to NRES and RRES, I'm not familiar with those program rules specifically, but that's something that we can certainly have our subject matter experts weigh in on.
That'd be great. Thanks, Joel.
Thank you. Robert Clee.
Just a really quick follow-up to that, at least for the residential and commercial solar programs, it's a 20-year contract. So would you have to, that's a question, I guess, for the utility folks. How do you assure that the refurbished reused panel is going to live that full life of the 20-year contract?
Yep. Okay, I'm going to move to the next question. So it's related to the current deployment of solar and storage. So how much solar and storage has been deployed in the state beyond the regulated programs you mentioned? So I think this goes back to one of the questions we had as a sample question earlier on with respect to what other should we be considering non installations that haven't been through a subsidized program.
Again, I think this is something that we'd like to tackle with the group as we go. Yeah, Sarah, I think you're right. This points back to that question. An example here for those of you not in Connecticut is, we were just talking about the regulated energy storage program, but of course, storage technology has been deployed in the state for several years now. And so, if you installed a home energy storage system 5 years ago, would your technology be covered by whatever program is initiated through the current energy storage program, or would it be a sort of a separate system? So we appreciate especially input on that one as we go through this.
Okay, the next question that's coming up is a question about what's happening internationally. So what's happening with end-of-life policy in other jurisdictions outside of the US. So I'll turn it over to Sarah, not necessarily to answer the question, but maybe to think about, like, is that of interest in terms of scope for us to be looking at, or should we, are we kind of focused in on peers within the US?
I think as we go through this process, if especially those of you that are actively working in end of life for solar and storage, if you think that there's like a gold standard from international that we should take a look at, or those of you that have waste expertise that suggest we look at it, happy to take a look. We probably won't go looking for it unless you tell us to. So,
okay, thank you. The next question is pretty administrative, but I think we've answered it.
I could add something real
super.
quick to that, because I'm familiar with it. Other countries, particularly Europe, is more advanced than us in the recycling and reuse. So I would recommend looking internationally to see how they do it. They're at least 3 to 5 years ahead of us. So.
Thank you, Stephen.
Yeah, that's right. Particularly Germany was an early mover in solar. So those many of the European markets have a lot longer track record than the US markets.
The next question is about sharing the PowerPoint presentation and monthly meetings. So just simply answer yes, we'll be sharing the meeting schedule. We have a proposed schedule in the presentation deck from today that outlined the topics that we hope to cover on each of the monthly meetings. So we'll make sure that we get those into folks' calendars as soon as possible and share the meeting dates as soon as possible as well. But the proposed meeting dates are outlined, and we'll just make sure we get things firmed up sooner than later for future meetings. Next question is, so I believe that Connecticut, there are certain programs meaning funding for larger arrays, but none for small in the 50 kilowatt range systems. Is there a used option maybe? So Andy, maybe this is your question. Maybe you want to elaborate a little bit on that. And
Yes, and I'm sorry, I misunderstood a little bit. It's not so much a question as a wish list,
sure.
but businesses, owners in town who don't have large roofs, but they're, they don't fit into the NRES program, and all of the business programs, the commercial programs, they don't have large enough roofs. So we're talking like anywhere from 25 to 100K. There's not a program for them. Wondering if there could be enough used panels and demand to kind of pave the way in that area. Again, like I said, more of a wish list than anything else, but there you have it.
Oh, good to hear that feedback. Sarah or Andrew, do you have any follow-up on that?
Not on my end. I'm
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, Sarah, I don't know if you want to talk about the programs or not, because I thought that in the NRES, I thought it in the NRES. I don't know the programs as well as you, but I thought that you would be able to do projects of that size. That was my understanding, but maybe I'm wrong.
I actually have worked more closely on the storage programs, so I'm hoping that one of my Green Bank colleagues or utility colleagues knows the size restrictions on the NRES and RES programs. Anyway, if not, we can get back to you with that information, Andy.
Yeah. RES, it's 25 kW. NRES, I'd have to take a peek and just double check.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Emil, I see your hand up.
Hi. Let's see, camera. Okay. So first of all, the NRES program will fit the 25 or 50 kilowatt system for small residential. It's got that 100 kilowatt cap. The biggest problem with the NRES program that's completely stalled any of the small solar is generally the funding rounds have absorbed all the money. It's been gone in like a day or so. So, it's really kept a lot of smaller projects out of the NRES, just kind of waiting till the, but anyway, I really appreciate, I'm so glad to see so many companies involved here on the group that are already recycling solar panels. And I think it's great that, we're talking about how to deal with the solar farms end of life. There is a current need right now. And I'm hoping we can coordinate with the Green Bank. Is the sad fact is right now there is solar panels going into garbage bags, going in a dumpster, and there's nobody going to be able to be able to see that. Unless there's somebody that's a tree hugger like me that stacks them up, and we're waiting for a solution. I'm starting to feel the storage issue now as I'm trying to inventory more solar panels, and I've got cracked stuff that has been sitting around for years, and microinverters. That's another thing. Any of you guys in the recycling business, if you have any solutions for these microinverters, please reach out. My company's Harness the Sun. I've got to get this stuff out of my space. So I do have some suggestions, some proposals. I'm sure the industry won't like, but if there's residential projects, usually don't always have a solar broken module, but pretty much anything over 25 kilowatts is going to be at least one broken module. And the truth is, any contractor, it's going to be cost prohibitive to collect a couple of modules and take it to a recycling center. So, unfortunately, I feel like there needs to be a little bit of a bond there. Any system, maybe a small bond of a couple $100 for residential, and then, anything over, all the NRES stuff is going to need a bond over $1,000, because it's technically going to cost me $1,000 to, whether I send 2 panels or say 60 panels that are broken, off to a recycling center. So, there's a need right now to facilitate a recycling program, because, like I said, unfortunately, what's happening in too many places is it goes in a garbage bag.
Right. Thanks for that, Emil. And I'm looking at the time, so we've got 5 minutes left, and I see Claire's hand up as well. So I think we'll get to Claire's comments, and then I'm going to pass it over to Andrew and Sarah to sort of wrap up and talk about next steps.
Great, thank you.
Thank you so much. Yep. Claire?
Thanks, Sarah. I just wanted to clarify that the NRES program does have a small zero emission projects category that accepts projects less than 200 kilowatts. But like Emil said, that's first come, first serve, so it does fill up quickly, but it is an option.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we landed on pretty good time. I'm going to turn it over to Andrew and Sarah to wrap up.
Well, I'll go first, and then Sarah, I'll hand it off to you. But thank you so much, everyone, for joining the call. I think it was a great discussion. This is the first of 5, so we're looking forward to getting into more depth in some of these topics. And as I said, ultimately, developing policy that will be a good fit with Connecticut and will respond to this request from the regulator. So our next meeting is April 29th. If you want to put that on your calendar, and looking forward to seeing everyone else again at that time. I will mention again that there is a website. I believe it was in the email that Sarah sent out with the meeting invitation, where these where our documents will be for you to take a look at. And yeah, look forward to seeing you at the next meeting. And with that, Sarah, from Green Bank, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Andrew. And thank you, everybody, for being here today. Look for email updates. Our hope is to sort of send you a finalized version of what you're looking at right now so that you can mark your calendars. The Pura direction mandates that we provide our recommendations to Pura by August 1st. So that's the timeline that we have. And I appreciate both your time this afternoon and any input and time that you can give us as we go forward through this discussion. So thank you again. I hope everybody has a wonderful afternoon, and see you next month.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.